Imagine being able to build your own tech startup even if you don't know how to code. Today, I'll show you how to build a real app from scratch that people actually use. I'll show you how to set up the best AI tools for building apps, how to install them, and how to use AI to build your app just by describing what you want in plain English. By the end of this video, you'll understand why you pick certain technologies, what a database is, and how these apps actually work. I'll even show you how to use AI to test and verify new features automatically so you don't have to. So if you've always wanted to build something but thought coding was too complicated, this video is for you. So the first thing we're going to do is install Visual Studio Code, often referred to as VSCode. I went to Google and just typed download VSCode. I'm going to go ahead and click into the first link there, which takes you to the download page. And from here, you're just going to pick your platform. I'll go ahead and click Mac because that's what I'm on. It's going to download it to my downloads directory. From here, I'm just going to double click on the zip file. And here we have VS Code. If we double click it, it's just going to actually run the software. It doesn't have an actual installer. So I'm going to take this and drag it into my applications. If you're on Linux or PC, just make sure to follow their specific instructions here. And if you're on a PC and you get stuck, just ask Claude or ChatGPT how to install it on your specific situation. It's a pretty easy piece of software to install. So now that I have it in my applications, I can go ahead and click on it and we're ready to roll. Now, the next thing we need to do is to install Claude Code. So I did this the same way. I went to Google and did Claude Code install and clicked on the first link here. And it has all the instructions for installing on Mac and Windows. And the standard installation is very easy. It's just this one simple command. Now it is using npm here, which is a node package manager. So if you go to your command line here and you type npm and it gives you a command not found, then you're going to need to install npm as well. And so there's a few different ways of doing that. You can go to node.js.org and follow their instructions. I actually used Homebrew myself, which is a Mac package manager, and it's pretty easy to install Node once you have that installed. And if you're wondering how to install Homebrew, you can go to brew.sh and you can take this simple command right here. You can copy it straight to your clipboard, jump into your terminal. You can copy that. And then if you run this, it's going to install Homebrew. Once you have Homebrew, then you can simply type brew install node and you'll be good to go for the next step. By the way, if you are wondering what the terminal is, the terminal is simply a place where you are allowed to enter direct commands into the operating system. In my case, I'm on a Mac, but every popular platform, whether it's Windows or Linux, has this black box. On a Mac, if you go to your Launchpad and then you go to your utilities, you're going to see the terminal right here and you can click on it. And then once you have it open, if you're doing a lot of development, you're likely going to use this. So you can right click on your terminal here, go to options, and then you can say keep in dock. But it's simply a place where you can access your operating system directly and type in commands. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to copy this command right here, come back to my terminal, paste it right there. We'll install Claude Code. So now if I type Claude, it should open right up. It's going to ask you a few permissions questions, go through that. Then it's going to ask you which style you want. I'm going to go with dark mode. And then it's going to ask you what type of subscription that you want. You can either use one of their monthly subscriptions, or you can just use their API directly and pay for whatever you actually use. If you go with one of their subscriptions, they're going to allow you to use the service so much per hour. And when you hit that limit, they're going to cut you off and then you'll have to wait and come back. If you use the API, then they're just going to bill you for what you use. For now, I'm going to go ahead and just set up the API. It's going to jump over to Claude. You'll go ahead and log in, continue, authorize, and you're good to go. If I come back to Claude, you'll notice that the login was successful. I can go ahead and hit enter. Then it's just giving you some security warnings. Go ahead and hit enter. It's going to ask you if you want to use the terminal setup. I'm going to go ahead and click yes. And then every time you set up Claude in a new directory, it's going to ask you for permissions. Go ahead and click yes. And now you're good to go. And so now from here, you could go ahead and start using Claude Code. All right. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and just exit out of Claude Code. I'm going to hit Control C and just get back to the terminal. Now I'm going to jump over to Visual Studio. And so now to install Claude Code into Visual Studio, I'm going to come up to the terminal here. I'm going to do new terminal and we're going to open up this window. It's just basically launching a terminal like we have here, except inside VS Code. I'm going to type Claude. It's going to request some permissions. I'm going to go ahead and allow, give it access to the folder. And now from here, what you want to do is you want to type /IDE. And now what this is going to do is it's going to automatically integrate Claude Code into Visual Studio. Go ahead and hit enter. And now it's connected to Visual Studio. I'm going to go ahead and close this window. In my terminal, I'm just going to make a sample project. jump back into Visual Studio. Notice here we have a Claude icon here, which is what you should expect. I'm going to open that new folder, sample project. So now I'm in a sample project. It's going to give you an option to use their Copilot. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now from here, I'm going to go ahead and launch Claude Code. So we have a window here. Again, it's asking us for permissions. We can go ahead and click yes. So now we have Claude Code installed into VS Code, and now we're ready to develop. If you're enjoying this video, make sure to like and subscribe. It tells me what type of content you want more of. All right, so now that we're set up, I'm going to go ahead and run my first prompt, which is going to build out our SaaS. We're going to build out a SaaS using Next.js. And while everything's getting built out, I'll explain a bit about why I'm using Next.js and what it is. Once it's built out, I'm also going to explain a bit more about VS Code. We'll have code in here, so it'll be a lot easier to discuss. We'll get that all built out, make sure you understand everything, and then we'll get into some more advanced features. So now this is a prompt that I built out previously for my community, the Vibe Encoders. Now, if you want this prompt, you can jump into the Vibe Encoders community. But if you wanted something simple, you could just go into Claude and say, please create a simple Claude Code prompt to create a simple Next.js app that I can use to build my next startup. And then it's going to go ahead and create that. You can just copy that and jump into Claude Code, drop it right here, and you could follow along from there. But I'm going to go ahead and paste in this other prompt that I have. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and come over here and I'm going to show you that there are a few different modes to Claude Code. And there's a bunch of things I'm going to show you about Claude Code as we go here. And if you hit Shift Tab, it's going to cycle through these different modes. This is in the default mode where it's showing nothing. And I can also hit Shift Tab and it's going to go to Auto Accept Edit. That means as Claude Code is running, it's going to simply accept all of the different choices that it comes up with on its own and just build everything out. And then you can also do Shift Tab and you can do Plan Mode, which is what we're going to do first. And then if you do Shift Tab again and we go back to the default, in this mode, it's going to ask you questions as it goes and it won't do anything without your permission. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift Tab twice and go into Plan Mode. And then I'm going to drop in my prompt. When there's a lot of text, it will go ahead and summarize everything just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Enter and allow it to analyze the prompt. Here it is. It's going to analyze that prompt and then come up with a plan before it actually executes it. Now, while it's doing that, I'm going to jump over here and explain a bit about what Next.js is. When it comes to coding and building out your SaaS, there are all sorts of different types of frameworks. If we jump back over to Claude and we said, what are the top 10 frameworks for building a modern SaaS? It's going to give us all of these different frameworks that we could use to build out a SaaS. There's a ton of them. And this is only 10, right? But you can see here it came back with number 1 as Next.js. And it's not because it's the only one, but it's very popular and I'll explain why. So when it comes to building out a SaaS, there's really 2 different things that we need. We need the front end and then we have the back end, which is the server that is running in the cloud that allows the front end to actually work. Because when you as the user access this front end, there is communication that is happening back and forth between the back end and then back to the front end to allow everything to happen. So I can save this page, I can reload it, and everything's going to be there. So the drawing and everything that I'm doing now is happening on the front end, but it's saving everything to the back end on the cloud. You've likely heard of AWS, where you can launch servers. Every SaaS has to have some sort of backend that is connected to a database, which is saving all of the information. It might also be interacting with various APIs that are doing other things. Maybe it's contacting OpenAI to do work to facilitate whatever the front end needs to do. It could be interfacing with Google for authentication. There's all sorts of different things that the back end actually needs to do. And then on the front end side, there's usually some sort of framework that is allowing you to build everything out in a fast way. And so one of those platforms is called React. So there's all these different libraries that have to be built out together in order to allow you to build out this SaaS. And so what happens is every time somebody goes to build out one of these SaaS platforms, they realize, man, this is hard. They're always starting from scratch and having to build out all of this complex software in order to make all of this happen. And so what people start to do is they start to realize that every time they build out these platforms, they're doing the same things over and over. And there's all this communication and infrastructure they have to build out in order to make the front end work and make it work with the back end. And they start to realize, oh, if I start to build a framework around this, then every time I launch a new SaaS, Instead of having to code out the front end and all of the libraries and set up React and then get it to work with the back end, they start to build out these packages, which is what Next.js is. So they can just install this, and then all of this work that has been done over and over again can just be installed and you can just have access to it. And Next.js is nice because what they do is they package together the front end and the back end together. And all of this communication that happens between them is already mapped out and works. And you don't have to build out any of those different things. So if you wanted to, you could build out a new SaaS and you could install React and you could build out your own backend server. You could use any type of language. You could use C++. You could use Java. These might be languages that you've heard about. You could use Node. Now, Next.js happens to use Node for the backend and React for the front end. So you could code your own Node backend. You could use Python. In fact, there's lots of popular frameworks that use Python. One of them is called Fast API. So if you were building out your own SaaS, you could build a React front end that talked to a Fast API backend. And if you wanted precise control over how all of this was built, and you really liked Python and you liked certain things about it, and there were certain requirements around your SaaS, you could build out everything from scratch, right? But this is going to take you a long time, as opposed to simply installing Next.js like we're doing here in VSCode and having everything built out for us. So I'm back here in Claude Code, and notice we were using the plan mode. So it came up with a plan that we can execute based on our prompt. You can go ahead and review everything and make sure that it's not doing anything that you don't want. So now one thing that I am seeing here is that it looks like it's going to try to set up Supabase. So let's talk about that just a bit so that you can understand all of these different platforms. And then I'm going to tweak that plan in Claude Code just so that we don't set up Supabase right now. So what Supabase does is it does a bunch of different things, but at the core of it, it provides two main features that people really love. Is it provides authentication, and it also provides a database. So just like Next.js provides us the code framework to launch a SaaS very quickly, it provides that front end and that back end. Supabase provides this database. So we have this back end here, but we also need a place to store all of the data. And that's what Supabase does, is it provides this database. It also provides a authentication system that the backend can communicate with to provide authentication for your users. And so you can see here what we have is Supabase is providing this here. Next.js is providing the framework for our SaaS. And there's actually going to be one other framework that we talk about, which is called Vercel, which is the cloud platform that will house our backend server. Next.js is the code, but then we actually have to deploy this code somewhere. And that's what Vercel is going to do. And Next.js happens to be developed and produced by Vercel. Now, do you have to use Vercel to deploy your Next.js app? No, you do not. They make it very easy to do so, and I'll show you how to do that. So if we take a quick look at what we're about to build here, is we have Next.js, which is going to provide the front end and the back end. The front end is running React, which is going to run in your browser, in Chrome or whatever you're using, which is going to communicate with the Next.js backend. And now this is running on a coding language called Node. This is going to be deployed on Vercel, and we're going to do all of this. We're going to build it all out. And then Vercel is going to be communicating with Supabase, which is going to be running our database and our authentication, auth. Okay. So these are the three systems that we're building. And so you can see now that by using Next.js and Supabase and Vercel, it's going to accelerate our ability to launch this in just a few minutes. But I wanted to understand how this is actually broken up on the back end so that you start to understand how these things are put together. So now I'm going to come back to VS Code. And what I noticed is that it was going to go ahead and create the Supabase project and the authentication system. But I want to break this down into smaller steps. So I'm going to actually break out of the plan here, say no, keep planning. And now from here, I'm actually going to use a program called Whisperflow that allows me to dictate directly into Claude Code to speed things up. Please do not create the Supabase project or the authentication system right now. I only want to create the files for the Next.js app so that I can run it locally. Please confirm and adjust the plan. So if I hadn't gone into plan mode, Claude would have gone ahead and just started to build out all of this, and I would have gotten ahead of myself. So that's why I use the plan mode, so that you can review and make sure it's doing what you want, and then you can go on from there. So I'm going to have it update the plan. The other reason why I'm simplifying the initial install is because I also want to show you another powerful part of Next.js, which is its local development setup. So when you actually launch your SaaS to the public, you're going to have this setup where you have the front end, the back end, and Supabase and Vercel all working together. But when you're building this out and you're testing it, you're going to be doing it on your computer. And so one of the other really cool things about Next.js is that it will set up your front end and your back end on your local computer, where you can test this before you set up all of the complexity here. So that's why I went ahead and removed that from our plan, so that it's taking fewer steps so that I can explain more things to you. Once you understand all this stuff, you can let Claude Code build out more. But when you're getting started, it's better to take smaller steps and understand what's going on as you go. So now I can scroll up and review the plan. You can see here that it's no longer building out Supabase or the authentication, and it's telling you exactly what it's going to build out right now. So from here, it's going to say, would you like to proceed? And it's going to give you a few options. We can say yes and auto accept edit. So this is just going to build it out, create all the files without asking you. You can go ahead and use 2, where it's going to ask you to create and approve each edit it does, which would be a little bit overwhelming with all the amount of work that needs to be done here. Or again, like I did before, you can hit 3 and continue to plan. I'm going to go ahead here and say yes and auto accept the edits. And so then what you're going to see is it's going to start to create all of these files in the Explorer here. It's going to create all the folder structures and the files to launch our Next.js app. Now, one thing you are going to notice is that when it's actually creating files and it's running commands on your computer, it's still going to ask you for confirmation. So here it's actually using this program to create the initial Next.js app. It's going to ask you this for each different type of command that it's running. If you want it to never ask you again for this type of specific command, then you can come here and say number 2, yes, and don't ask me again for this particular command. And if that's a little bit confusing, because we were just talking about how when we accepted the plan, it said to do the auto edits, it's a little bit different. So there's modifying files in the folder, which is what it was talking about before when we were talking about the plan or the auto edits. But when it's actually running commands like move and delete, it is going to ask you to confirm each one of those things. So I'm going to go ahead and give it permission to move files for me. And I would like to remind you, anytime you're developing and it's asking you a question and you don't know what it is, feel free to just copy it and jump back to Claude, ask a question here, or simply ask a question in Claude Code itself. If you wanted to, you could hit escape. It would stop what it's doing and you could ask a question. I always encourage people to ask as many questions as they need to, because as you start to develop your SaaS, there's all these different choices that you'll need to make. And the more you understand about each of these choices, the better your app's going to be. And then when you go to build your next app, you're going to be that much smarter when you have similar questions to answer. Now, from time to time, this is going to happen where it detects something that's a possible issue that might be an issue and it might not. Now, depending on your experience, there's no way for you to necessarily know whether that's an issue or not. And that's why I always encourage people to just review what's happening and ask questions as you go. So what I noticed here was that it noticed that there's a Claude Code configuration file here, and it thought that might be an issue, but it's not really an issue. And then it started to want to create a temporary file, and then it started to go down that path, and then it actually timed out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to back out here and say, the Claude Code configuration file is not an issue. Don't worry about it. Just continue to build out the app with the Claude Code configuration there. The command that it was trying to run timed out anyway, and so I'm just going to tell it not to worry about it. And then while that's running, I'm going to jump over to the terminal here, and I'm going to jump into the sample project. I'm going to do an ls and do a -LA. And what that is going to do is it's going to tell me all of the files that are in this current directory. And now what I'm noticing here is that the Claude Code configuration file is gone. And I can see here that it copied it to the parent directory into .claude_temp. So I'm going to come to the terminal here and I'm just going to type move ... .claude temp. I'm going to move it back to the current directory and I'm going to call it Claude again. So what I did there was I moved the file that was copied to the parent directory back to the current directory to fix that issue that it thought it needed to work around. And again, here we have another command that it wants to run. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. So I'm just showing you literally what happens from time to time, because you will need to be able to navigate it. And that's why I encourage people to, number one, watch what's happening And if you don't understand, or if it seems odd, stop everything and ask. And feel free to learn as you go. Again, I'm going to go ahead and say accept. I'm going to go ahead and say yes, accept. Now, one thing I will say is that Claude would have likely fixed this on its own down the line, but I just knew that it didn't need to do that. I'm going to go ahead and accept this, number 2, so that it doesn't ask me again. Now, while it's doing that, one thing I will show you is that if we come into the Claude code file here, you're going to see here, I'm in the settings.local.json, and this is the folder that Claude moved out of this directory. It's funny that it moved its own directory, but you can see here in the permissions file here, just to show you all of the commands that we are accepting and allowing it to run on its own are being saved into this permissions allow JSON so that it doesn't have to ask us the next time. So it's continuing to build things out. It's discovering some things and fixing it as it goes. So now while this is building out, let me go ahead and explain a little bit about what VS Code is and how it works at a basic level. So it's really just a text editor. On the left-hand side here, you have the main folder that you are inside right now. So every time you come up here and you open up a folder, it's going to open up this window and it's going to navigate this project as this is the root folder. And then you notice we have Claude Code here, which is running, and then there's a little lock here. All that lock means is that it's not going to create additional tabs in this separate window that we have here. And that's going to come on as a default, which is actually what you want, because when you open up additional files here, it's better when they just open up here. And if you double click on them, it's going to continue to open up new files. It's better that all of those files open up on the left-hand side and you can just toggle between them and you can let Claude Code run over here on the right side on its own. And of course, if you did want to run multiple Claude codes at the same time, you could click that and you could do something totally different here as well. Now, you wouldn't want to run Claude Code on the same file. So if you were working on different features, it might work okay. In the beginning, I don't recommend running multiple Claude codes at the same time. So when you close one of these, it's going to ask you, do you really want to terminate? And it's asking you that because if I were to terminate this here, it would lose all of the context of what we were doing. So it looks like it's finishing up here and it's asking us, do we want to run npm run dev? So now this is an important point. I'm going to take a step back here and just explain what's happening. So once you set up your Next.js app, we have all of this code here. And I do encourage you to explore and learn what all of these different files actually do. But here what it's doing is it's saying, do you want me to run npm run dev? So what this is going to do is it's going to launch the local server. And remember what we talked about, one of the nice features about Next.js is not only does it create the front end that runs in the browser and the back end that communicates with Supabase so that you don't have to build all this, but it also sets up a local development environment that you can run locally. And that's what's happening here with this command, npm run dev. So you could run it here. I like to run it myself in my own terminal here. So usually what I do here is I say no, and then I jump over to the terminal and I type it myself, npm run dev. And I like to run this myself because sometimes you need to cancel it. You need to exit out. If I hit Control C, it's going to exit out of the app. It's just nice to be able to run it on your own instead of having Claude Code do it. And that way I can control what's running, and then I can have Claude Code actually doing the development. So let's go ahead and do npm run dev. But what I will say is that if you ever run into issues, it looks like everything started up just fine. But if you ever run into issues over here, you can just take this and you can do a copy and you can just paste it into Claude Code and you can say, hey, we're having an issue, whatever that is, and it will fix it. So now the terminal says, okay, your application is running and it's giving you this local and network address so that you can access your app. This is actually the same thing, but if you wanted to access your SaaS from a different computer, you would use this here if you're running locally like I am here. If you're developing and using this on the same computer like I am here where we're working on it and we want to access it, then you can just use local. And if I come over to the browser, I can type that in. It's going to load the Next.js app. And you can see here that we have our Next.js app all built out. Our front end, now the one thing I'm noticing is that it's not really centered, but we have our light and dark mode, that's working. We have our pricing, about, doesn't have an about page. Doesn't have a contact page, which is fine. I'm just going to go back to the main homepage and I'm going to fix this issue and center it. And I'll dictate those changes. The site is coming up just fine, although I noticed that the SaaS application is left justified instead of centered. Can you go ahead and fix that? All right, so I went ahead and fixed that and then it's giving us a summary of what it did. Let's jump back to our app, refresh. noticing that it's still left justified. Now, one reason why I do like to run this in the terminal here is because I can cancel it. There might be some sort of caching issue. This is something that you're going to run into sometimes. I'm going to go ahead and just run the command again, and we'll rerun it. And we got the same issue. This is very common, so don't worry when this happens. Gonna just jump back to Claude Code. Whatever fix you did to try to center the homepage, it didn't work. It's still left justified. Now, one other thing I do want to point out here is that sometimes there are caching issues. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the project again, and I'm just going to explore with the ls-la again. So again, what ls does is it lists the files in the current directory. When you put L, it does it in this long format here. If I just did ls like that, you're going to see it like that, which is harder to see. So I'm going to do ls-l. If you just do L, then you see all of the non-hidden files. If I do ls-la, we're going to see all the hidden ones. We see these here. So now this .next folder here is a caching folder. So sometimes when you're running into issues with your Next.js app, it's because there are cached files in here. I don't know that that's the issue here, but it could be. I'm just kind of pointing these things out so that as you go and you start to understand things, you can figure that out. In fact, I'm just going to ask here now, is it possible that something is cached or that we need to rebuild something? Let me know. So now in this case, it's trying to kill the server. It's not running. I'm going to go ahead and stop it. And I'm going to tell it, I don't want you to run it yourself. It's not running right now. I'd just like you to fix the cache issue. If it is, I don't know that it is. So I told it not to try to kill it because it's not running. I'm going to dictate some new instructions. So I don't want you to kill the app. It's not currently running. I'm going to manage running the app or not. What I'd like you to do is to worry about whether we need to clear the cache. I don't know that we need to clear it. I was just suggesting that that might be a possibility. The main thing is that the app is not left justified. I'd like you to focus on that. If you want to clear the cache. Let me know when I can go ahead and run the app again. And please run the build on your own to make sure that everything is running. All right, so now we have the prompt here. I could go ahead and hit enter, but I want to take this opportunity to introduce something that's pretty cool. So now what Claude Code is able to see is all of the code that's running in VSCode. So it has access to all of that. But what ends up happening is that all of this code actually translates into something that's visual, that's running inside of your browser, which it doesn't have access to. So it's able to look at the code and determine if something is left justified or right justified. But sometimes it's harder to find it in the code versus just being able to see the actual app. So now what I want to introduce now is this concept of MCPs. What we're going to do is we're going to give Claude Code a tool that allows it to actually view the browser itself so that it can confirm that everything is running properly, so that it can actually look and see that it's left or center justified. And the tool we're going to use is something called Playwright. Now I could copy and paste that command, but I want to just show you to empower you how to do something like this with Claude Code. Now you would have to know that this MCP exists, but once you know that, I want to show you how you can use Claude to actually figure out how to install this MCP yourself. So I'm going to do some more dictation. I'm using Claude Code, and I know there is an MCP for Playwright that will allow Claude Code to visually inspect my Next.js app so that it can see what's happening and take a screenshot and fix things itself. Can you please give me the Claude Code command that will install Playwright MCP? Please use the documentation online to figure this out. Don't do this on your own. Figure out how to use Claude Code, add the MCP, add the Playwright MCP, and give me the command that I can use in the command line to install this. And you'll notice that I said, don't do this on your own. I should have been more verbose there. I should say, use the web to do the research. Please use the web to do this research instead of trying to figure it out on your own. So sometimes you want to say, hey, use the web to make sure you're doing this correctly. Otherwise, it might just use what it knows and it might miss more recent information. So notice that it's saying Claude Code, but it looks like it figured that out. All right, so now here's the command. All right, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to jump back to the terminal here, and I'm going to go ahead and run this. So just added it. Now I'm not sure whether Claude Code will be able to use this or if we have to reload it or not. So I'm going to jump back to Visual Studio. I'm going to just delete this. Now I'm going to type MCP. So now there are no MCPs configured. So now we might have to restart Claude Code in order for this to work. I'm going to go ahead and ask Claude Code if it's able to load that configuration dynamically. I just added a MCP to your Claude Code configuration, and I'm noticing when I type /MCP, it's not there. Are you able to dynamically load that in now without me having to restart Claude Code? Or do I need to restart Claude Code in order to get access to that MCP? So you're going to see here, I often just discuss things with Claude Code, and I'm trying to learn along the way because I don't know if I can do this or not. All right, so it's telling me that I'll need to restart. No problem. Can you go ahead and just output where we are in the current session right now so that I can exit Claude Code, I can come back in, test the MCP, and then I can paste that back in so that we can start off where we left off. So what I'm doing here is that I'm going to have to close this, and so I'm going to lose the entire conversation here. And I would like to be able to come back into Claude Code and pick up where we left off, since it's not going to remember all the stuff that we've done here. All right, so it's just giving us this. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to create a temporary file that I'm going to delete just to have it. Now what I can do is I can close Claude Code, open it back up again. Now I should be able to type MCP, and now we can see we have the Playwright MCP. So we gave Claude Code a tool so that it can view our own app that we're building. And now I can grab this, which is our session data. I'm pasting in here a quick recap of a previous session we were working on, just so you understand where we're at. Let me know if you understand everything, and then we'll move on from there. Just please confirm, and then I'll paste in that. Cool, so it understands everything. That was kind of a long-winded way to get back to the issue we were having with our website here, which was the left justification. So now from here, we can go ahead and use the Playwright MCP to have it fix this and actually view it itself to make sure it's done. So in this case, I'm going to come back to Visual Studio. So we have a current issue with our current Next.js app. Everything is left justified on the homepage. We would like to center justify it. Please go ahead and use the Playwright MCP to confirm that you've fixed this. Go ahead and rebuild and run the app yourself, and then use the MCP to confirm everything is okay. So we'll go ahead and do that. All right, so here you can see it's suggesting that it adds this code here. I'm going to go ahead and say yes and don't ask again this session. So now it's going to go ahead and rebuild the app. Now this time, I'm going to go ahead and let it run these commands. I mentioned before that sometimes I like to run it in the terminal. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and let it run on its own. That way I can go ahead and test everything itself with the MCP. So now it's going to use the Playwright MCP, which is a new tool. So we're going to go ahead and say, yes, you can go ahead and do this on your own. So notice it's actually opening this up. I did not do this. It opened that up on its own, and now it's going to take a screenshot. Again, it's continuing to ask permission. Each time it runs a different command, it's going to ask permission. As this project grows, it's not going to ask the same things as you confirm each one of these things. So now it's taking a screenshot itself, and then it's going to analyze the screenshot. So now again, here, it's going to read that. Yes, go ahead. You have permission to read. I mentioned before, I'm going to come over here to the settings here and notice that all of these different things are being added to the permissions allow here. So you can see here, the MCP Playwright now has permission to navigate and take screenshots. So it's not going to ask us that next time. So now you can see the centering issue has been fixed looking at the screenshot. So it did all of that for us instead of us having to go look and test it out. And so now when you build out your apps, you can actually have Claude Code do verification on its own that it's doing what it should do. And now if we come back to our browser and refresh, we can see here that everything is centered. But now I am seeing a few other issues. The homepage looks a little bit compressed here instead of being the full width of the rest of the site. I believe this is what it calls the hero image. I'm also noticing that that's also happening here, and the most popular is covering up the pro as well. So these are all things that we can simply dictate and fix. So I'm going to dictate while I watch here, and then I'm going to copy paste that dictation back into Claude Code. So I'm noticing the hero image is a bit compressed width-wise. It doesn't seem like it's expanding to the width of the rest of the site. Can you go ahead and fix that and use the MCP to confirm that you've fixed that? I'm also noticing on the pricing that it also seems a bit compressed on the width. And the most popular tag is covering up the pro wording on the middle pricing option. Go ahead and use the Playwright MCP to first see this yourself, and then go ahead and make the fix. Take another screenshot using the Playwright MCP to make sure that your code is correct. So now I can come into Whisperflow, grab that transcription, jump back to Visual Studio here, and we'll go ahead and run that. So the nice thing about using the Playwright MCP is that sometimes with visual stuff specifically, because Claude Code can't actually see it and it's just trying to fix things with CSS. And let me show you what CSS is. If I come into the source here, we have all of this code here, which is styling the website. Claude Code can only see it from this code perspective. If it's actually able to see, then it can actually determine whether it's actually fixing anything. So it can see the issue. So it thinks it's fixed it. Now it's going to go ahead and verify. It's going to, again, go to the web page and do a screenshot and then analyze the screenshot. All right, cool. So it says it successfully fixed it. So I'm going to come back myself. All right, so it fixed the hero image, but now the most popular seems to be hidden, but it's no longer covering the pro. My guess is most popular should actually be above here instead of in the box itself. So I'm going to go ahead and just give one more instruction. It looks like the hero section was fixed properly. However, in the pricing section, the most popular tag is now hidden. My guess is that the most popular tag should be above the 3 boxes, above the middle box instead of in the box itself, because now it's actually covered up. It's hidden underneath the top line of the box. So let's go ahead and fix that. Let's move the most popular graphic above the middle box. And then let's go ahead and use the MCP to first look at the issue yourself so that you can see it. And then make sure that once you've fixed it, go ahead and use the Playwright MCP again to confirm that it is in the right position and it is fixed. So I'm just going to grab this, drop it into Claude Code. So you can see here, it's able to verify the issue on its own, comes up with a solution. All right, so it says it's fixed. So let's go ahead and refresh. All right, so now we have that. And so now what I can see here is that it's now pushing this box down lower. We can see the box now, but now the most popular is pushing down the middle option and the boxes are no longer aligned. Please make sure that the most popular is not pushing down the center box. Go ahead and take a look at the way it looks right now and think a little bit about how that looks so that I don't have to tell you every little thing about how this should look like. You're more than capable of looking at that and making sure that the final solution is going to look the right way. So now it's kind of interesting that we're running up against this. I've run this prompt several times before and never have. This is the way it works sometimes, but it also gave us an opportunity to play around with the Playwright MCP. So what you'll find sometimes is that when you're coding with AI, you'll find yourself get into these little loops here from time to time where it's just really not behaving in a smart way. And so when you find yourself in that situation, always feel free to back out and give it better commands. Because if you find yourself in a loop with AI where it's not fixing anything and it's just creating new bug after new bug, then you're going to be the one that has to pull itself out and recenter it. Sometimes completely stepping back and analyzing the situation, going back into plan mode and fixing things. So notice now it's hidden again. Let's see what it's doing. So it's going to take a screenshot. Let's see if it finds the issue on its own. See, it's hidden again. Now the most popular option icon is hidden again. So we've really reverted ourselves back. So what I'd like you to do is take a second and come up with a plan to make sure that this doesn't happen, because we're just going in a loop here. What I think should happen is that most popular item should happen outside of the 3 boxes. Instead of trying to put that in there and now it's hidden, that should be above all 3 boxes so that the boxes can be aligned. Please come up with a solid plan to make sure that we can, number 1, see it without it being hidden, and number 2, that it doesn't affect the other 3 boxes. So here I went ahead and dictated the instructions, and I'm going to do a shift tab, and I'm going to go back into plan mode. And then just for your own understanding, the way that CSS often works, these 3 boxes are often inside of another invisible box that you can't really see. And so that's why we're seeing this alignment issue. So what I think it should really do is put this up here outside of that so that it's not really affecting everything else. So AI is definitely smart, but sometimes it comes up and gets itself into a loop that it can't get out of. So we have a new strategy. So it's going to move that most popular outside the grid system. So let's go ahead and let it go. All right, so it says it's fixed, and there we go. Awesome. And it's giving us a summary of what it did. All right, so now in preparation for deploying our SaaS application, I want to show you a couple of other cool things. We've already installed the Playwright MCP, and you've seen the power of that. We need to install the MCP for GitHub and Supabase. I'm going to explain why in just a second. And then I'm also going to show you how to launch specialized agents for your Claude Code instance. Let's go ahead and do this a little bit of out of order. I'm going to go ahead and do GitHub first. Remember before we were talking about how to set up our Next.js app and the different pieces of that application. In order to actually deploy our application on Vercel, where we have some sort of domain name .com, where our app lives, we're going to use a platform called Vercel. Do you have to use Vercel? No, you do not, but they make it super easy. So we're going to start there. And then if you want to move it later, you can. What's cool about Vercel is they integrate with a platform called GitHub, which is a popular platform where you can store your code and work with other developers and keep everything nice and clean. By the way, I just did a video on my YouTube channel going over GitHub in detail, so check that out. So let's go over to GitHub and I'll explain what's going on here. So I'm going to go to GitHub. If you don't have an account, you're going to want to create one. And I'm going to come up here. I'm going to create a new repository and I'm going to just call this sample SaaS app. And I'm going to make this a private repository so that nobody else can access it. Of course, I could share it with my team, but this is going to be an empty repository. And again, all GitHub is designed to do is to help you store your source code. So now we have our sample SaaS app. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my settings here. I'm going to go to settings. I'm going to come down here to developer settings. And I'm going to create a personal access token, a fine-grained token, so that I can connect up the GitHub MCP so that I can give Claude Code a new tool, which is to be able to work with my GitHub repository so that it can do all of that work for me, okay? So I'm going to create a new token. So I'll give the token a name, sample SaaS token. I'm not going to put in a description. We're going to have it so that it can only access specific repositories. And then we have to add specific permissions. We're going to give it access to the content, issues, and pull requests. And then for each of these, we're going to do read and write. So that way, this token is able to read and write the repository, issues, so that Claude Code can use GitHub and access all of these different things on behalf of us. That way, we don't have to come into Git. Claude Code can just do it for us. Okay, so I'm going to generate this token, generate the token. Now we've got that token here. So I'm going to jump back to the terminal. Inside Notion here, I've got the command for adding the GitHub MCP, expand this a little bit. So you can take a second here and copy this just as I have it here. And what we're going to do is just simply replace this GitHub token with the token that we just created over in GitHub. We'll go ahead and hit enter. It added that here. So now if I type Claude and MCP, we now have GitHub and we already had Playwright. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing over in Supabase. I'm going to show you how to use these, but I just want to get these set up now. So I'm going to go into Supabase. So if you don't have a Supabase account, you're going to need to create one. You can create a free account and you can create free projects. And we're going to have a new project name. We're going to go with SaaS. We're going to go with sample SaaS. Again, I have a paid account, but you can do a free one. We're going to come up with the database password, make sure we give it a username so we know sample SaaS, so we know which one it is. We're going to create that new project. It's going to set up that project. It's going to take just a second. I'm going to jump over to project settings. Here's our project ID. Now I'm going to jump over to account preferences. I'm going to create a new access token here, sample SaaS. So now we've got this token here so that Claude Code is able to access Supabase and it's able to create the database for us so that we don't have to do this manually. We'll come back down here. We'll exit out of Claude Code, get back to the command line. I'm going to grab the command for creating the Supabase MCP for adding this. So we can see here we have to add the access token. We'll grab this here, copy, come back to the command line, paste, then go to the end here, and we just need to get the project reference. Again, we'll jump back to the dashboard. We're going to grab this project ID right here, paste, add the MCP, jump back into Claude /MCP. All right, so now we've got GitHub, Playwright, and the Supabase MCP. So now Claude has the tools it needs to access GitHub, access Supabase, Playwright, so that it can do all of our development. Now, the final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this new feature, which is agents, and it allows you to create sub-agents inside Claude Code that have special abilities. So now you might want to create all sorts of different agents. You might want to create one that's an expert at GitHub and one that's an expert at Supabase. In this video, what I'm going to show you is how to create an expert Next.js developer. We're building out our app with Next.js, and so I want to have an agent that is a Next.js expert. So we're going to create a new agent, and we're going to create that agent inside of this particular project. If you were to create it as personal, then this agent would be able to access all of the projects that you ever create. So right now in VS Code, we're inside this sample project. So if I create that agent here, it's only going to be available to this particular project when I'm running Claude code over here. Otherwise, it would be available in all of them. I think to start, it makes sense to just create project level agents. So we're going to generate with Claude or manual configuration so that people are sharing their agents online. So if you were to go to manual configuration, you would be able to add it. In this case, I'm going to generate with Claude. And now we just put in a description of what we want this agent to do. And you want to be as comprehensive as possible. Now you will be able to modify this later, so don't obsess about this. Expert Next.js front end and back end developer that knows all of the recent updates and community best practices for developing SaaS applications using Tailwind and Shade CN. So it just so happens that we're using a couple of different libraries that I happen to know about, so I'm mentioning these here. If you're wondering what to do here and what to say, well, one, feel free to jump into the Vibe Encoders community. The link's in the description. We can talk about it there. But you can also just use Claude. Explain that you want to use all the best practices. Explain that you're trying to create an agent for Claude Code, and you want a description that is going to help you build a modern agent for Claude Code, and it will help you do that. And feel free to say, hey, what are the community standards? What should this agent know? Feel free to go back and forth with it and ask it questions to make sure you're building the right agent. And at the same time, don't obsess about it because you can always change it later. So this is going to go ahead and create that agent, and then you're able to determine what it has access to, the different tools, the MCPs, all of those different things. I'm going to go ahead and just say everything. And then you can tell it what model it has access to. I'm going to go ahead and just use Sonnet. You can give it a color. I'm just going to go with automatic color, and then go ahead and hit enter to create that agent. And there it is. And you can go into it and view that agent. And so we can see these are all the different things that this agent is aware of. So now one thing that I'm noticing here is I'm just reading this and it's saying database integration patterns. And it's not necessarily mentioning anything about Supabase and Postgres. So I'm going to just exit out. I'm going to say edit agent, open editor, and we have this here. So I could just take this. I could come over to Claude and I could say, can you modify this agent to be a expert in Supabase, Supabase auth, and Supabase Postgres instead of generic database experience, only change that. So it's going to modify it. Then we could take this, copy it, edit the agent, save it, and now we should be able to view the agent. I'm not actually seeing those changes. I'm not sure exactly how that's supposed to work. So I'm just going to delete it, create a new one, project, and I'm going to paste in all of this, let it work with that, continue, Sonnet, automatic color, and now we can take a look at the new agent, and now we can see that that one has the skills that we needed, because Supabase definitely has its own features and we want this agent to be aware of those different things. All right, so now that we have our specialized agent, we've built out all of our MCPs, we're good to go to build out our to-do app. And we're going to use these MCPs to help us build this out so that we don't have to do all of the work ourselves. Traditionally, when you build out an app that has a database, we would have to come in here and design the database and do all that ourselves. We'd come in here to this SQL editor or the table editor, and we would create the table here, and then we'd have to create all the columns. And if you're familiar with Airtable, you get a sense of what I'm talking about. But here, what we should be able to do is just jump back into VS Code, and I'm going to go into plan mode, and I'm just going to start to dictate what I want to build. And in this case, what I'm going to build is just a very simple to-do app and have it build out the database, and then we'll commit everything back to GitHub, and then we will publish this app on Vercel so that it's actually public and people could use it. I want to create a plan around a to-do app. Let's go ahead and put this new page on /to-do. And I want to build out a very simple to-do app where people can create to-dos, and then they should be able to clear those to-dos off. And there should also be a way for them to see past to-dos that have been cleared out. Can you go ahead and build out a plan to do so? Keep in mind, I want to use the Supabase MCP that is already connected. Actually, before I do this, I'm going to go ahead and clear this out. This is one thing I want to mention here is that this agent and the MCPs have not been loaded into Claude Code. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out so we have a fresh start. Every once in a while, you want to do that. I'm also going to run /init, What this is going to do is it's going to look at the code that we have now, and it's going to write a Claude code.md file, which is going to tell Claude everything about the app so that it has some context. So I'm going to do that first really quick. All right, it wants to create that MD file. So now we have the Claude MD file. So what this is going to do is it's going to tell Claude every time it runs just information about the site so that it has more context and it can do a better job when it runs. Now I should also be able to run MCP. We're going to see the MCPs. If I had used the other session that I had, these wouldn't have been here. And we're also going to have our new agent. So now I can jump back to Whisperflow, and then I can grab the transcription I was working on. Now I can hit enter, and it'll go ahead and create the plan. Then we can review it, and then we can let it get going. All right, so here's our plan. Now, one thing I'm noticing here is that this final to-do here is user-specific data isolation via RLS. So this is a security setting that requires that you have authentication. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off for now. And then when I come back to create authentication, I would then turn this back on again. And I did forget to go into plan mode, so I'm going to jump into plan mode. Let's go ahead and leave off the user-specific data isolation via RLS off for now. Let's just go ahead and access the database without row-level security and authentication, and we can add that later. So it's going to create a new plan. So here's our new simplified plan: database setup, core page structure, Supabase integration, UI polish, and the key features. And let's just let it go. So here it wants to use the MCP for the first time. So I'm going to go ahead and just say, yes, go ahead and use it, and don't ask me again. Now notice here, it's not asking me to confirm some of these commands at this point now because it has already run this one and asked me before if it's allowed to do this type of action without confirmation. And again, remember, all of that is set up here. If you'll notice, this is starting to grow because we've continued to give Claude Code additional permissions to run things on our computer without having to ask. I'm always surprised when you give it a set of instructions, how fast it'll actually work through all of these different to-dos and build everything out. So you can see it's starting to build things out, and as it goes, it's actually finding better ways of doing things, and it's finding simpler approach, which is great. I'm going to jump over to Supabase. I'm going to see if it's actually created any table yet. It looks like it has. Notice it has this little warning here, under restricted, because we turned off the RLS, and you can see that here as well. And I would encourage you to do a little bit of research on Supabase and RLS to see what it is. All right, so it has the development server up and running. I'm noticing that it's on port 3001. And that's because we are already running an additional server here that it never turned off. So I'm just going to give it permission to remove that server. I noticed you ran the server on port 3001 because there's something already on 3000. Go ahead and terminate the old server and run it on port 3000. Do whatever you need to do to rebuild and get it running again so we can test it. And then go ahead and use the Playwright MCP on the page you created to make sure it looks the way you wanted, and rebuild until it does. And one thing I'm going to mention here too is that you can see here, it says one bash running. And what that means is that there's a backend process that's already running, which is that server that we started earlier. But we'll give it permission to kill that server and restart it. I'm going to continue to give it permissions to do the jobs that it needs to do. So what's cool about this is that it's going to take a screenshot and it's going to see that there's an error. There we go. Actually, it's working fine. We'll go ahead and give it access to run the Playwright. And it's actually going to be able to test. It's actually putting in the information and actually testing it. So it's pretty cool. It's able to actually put in text and do it. And then it's going to actually click the button. So not only can it take a look, but it can actually interface and add things on here, click buttons and make sure things actually work, which is really cool. So you can see here, it's actually running the app, using the app, clicking buttons and testing it all out. All right, so it says it's done here. I'm going to jump back over to go to the to-do, test, add task. So we've got the active tasks, and then we can complete those, show completed, and we can toggle back and forth. Pretty cool. And then if we jump over to Supabase and we refresh this database here, I'm not actually seeing the to-dos here, so that's a little interesting. I was just inside Supabase, inside the table that you created, and I didn't see the to-dos in the database. Did you implement that part of it yet? I said not to create the authentication, but we should be using the database to store these to-dos. So let's go ahead and confirm that with Claude Code. So you're seeing here, it's kind of funny with AI sometimes. it created the functionality, but it's just using in-memory functionality to run this. So it's not actually storing any of these to-dos inside the database. It's going to go ahead and use the MCP to get all of the information it needs from Supabase. This would normally be something that we'd have to set up ourselves. Inside Supabase here, there's the project overview. We need this project URL and the API key in order to do this. But with the MCP, it will just access all of that and do it for us. All right, it's filling in that information for us automatically again. Let's see, I'm gonna jump over to Supabase, back into the table, refresh, and now we actually have a row in the database, which is awesome, and it's working. So what I think is really interesting about this is that using the MCPs, Playwright and Supabase, and you'll soon to see how we use GitHub. With these tools, it's able to actually do all of the things that normally we would have to be doing on our own. So not only is it writing the code, but it's going and configuring and testing and doing all of those things so that we don't have to. So here we are, we're good to go. I'm also going to jump back to my tester over here and do test 2, add task, refresh. There it is, test 2. Completed is false. And if I change this to completed is, I'll do a refresh, and there we go. All right, so now all I have to do is tell Claude Code to initialize this folder as a Git repository, and then I'm going to have it upload and push those files into the GitHub repository that we added earlier, which is right here. We've got the sample SaaS app that we connected earlier, and we're going to need this here so it knows which repository to use. Now, I'm pretty sure that the MCP should be able to commit all of this code, but we'll see. Now, I'm going to use another command here. I'm going to do a /clear, which is going to reset the context here. And I recommend doing that from time to time because all of this other context here is going to be loaded up every time, and it can confuse Claude Code from time to time. So you start a totally new action, I recommend using the clear. So we'll clear it out and I'll go ahead and dictate. All right, now I'd like to go ahead and initialize this sample project folder as a Git repository. Feel free to use the MCP or the actual Git command on my computer, depending on what works the best, or if you need one or the other. Go ahead and initialize this as a Git project. And then let's go ahead and add the remote to this project. And then let's push all of this to the remote repository for our first commit. And then I'll paste in this here so it knows which repository it is. And we'll go ahead and hit enter. So just to explain a bit here, when you have a folder here, it's not a Git repository yet. You have to initialize it. And so it's going to go ahead and do that using git init. So this is actually just running a local command on my computer. And now it's running another local command to add the remote origin. And what the remote origin is nothing more than just telling this particular Git repository that this is the specific repository on GitHub that we are using, because technically I could push any of these files to any Git repository. It doesn't necessarily have to be this one. It just so happens that this is the one that I want to use. And if you're interested, I did just post an entire Git crash course on my channel. Feel free to check that out. So we'll go ahead and say yes, add the remote origin. Now it's going to take all of the files that are inside of this folder structure and it's going to add them into the local Git repository. You see here, git add dot. We'll go ahead and let it do that. And now it's going to commit all of these local files into the local Git repository. And then it's finally going to push all of those to the remote origin now. So it looks like it's finished. Let's see if I refreshed, we have all the code there. So there's all the code, perfect. So now that we have the code on GitHub, now we can jump over to Vercel, go to vercel.com. We can go to add new. And then what it's going to want to do is it's going to connect up to one of our repositories. So then you're just going to search for your app, type sample, and now it's not coming up. So what that means is I need to configure the app so that it has access to that new repository. So here's Vercel, and we simply need to add an additional app so that it has access to it. We'll save it. There it is. We'll do an import. All right, so I'm going to need these environment variables. I'm going to go open that. I'm going to jump over to Visual Studio. I'm going to come over to this env.local. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Then we're going to need to copy these values in here. I'm going to copy the name here, add more, and then we'll copy this here, drop it in. Then we'll grab the second one, drop it there, and then get that final value, key, drop it in, and now we'll go ahead and deploy it. So now what it's going to do is it's going to download the repository, which is all of these files here. It's going to deploy it to Vercel, and it's going to use these environment variables to launch it, which are the configuration variables that allow us to connect up to Supabase and use this specific database. So it looks like we have an error. So now what I can do is I can copy this and I can take it back to Claude Code. Looks like I had a deployment error when I tried to deploy this on Vercel. Here is the error. Please help me fix it. Now, one thing to keep in mind is I just pasted in the error here. Keep in mind that this error is now happening on Vercel, and it was using the files from GitHub, okay? So when we fix it locally now, we're gonna have to push it back up to GitHub in order to redeploy it, okay? So if we fix it here locally, that's not gonna fix it inside GitHub, which is what Vercel used to actually deploy it. But we do have to fix it locally. So it's gonna fix it and then we'll push it. And typically what you're also gonna wanna do too is make sure that it works locally before you push everything again. Otherwise, you're just gonna waste time. So you can see here, it's trying to build it again locally. It's running into some errors, so it's gonna fix all that. All right, so I was able to fix that. Now in this case, Claude Code was smart enough to know that it needs to commit this. So we'll go ahead and move forward. It's gonna commit it and then push it. And I'm just gonna make sure that locally it's working. Here's our app, internal server error. So before I go through the trouble of testing on Vercel, I'm gonna tell Claude Code that it's not working locally. It doesn't seem to be working locally. Can you confirm that it's working locally, clear the cache, whatever you have to do to get it working locally before we try to test on Vercel again? So sometimes you run into caching errors where it needs to clear out the cache and run again. So it's going to restart everything. So let's check out the dev server. All right, so this is working again. Test two, add task. Looks like it's working. I already confirmed it, so I'm going to just say no. I already confirmed that it's working. Go ahead and commit the changes and push those to GitHub. And so now what it's telling me is that all of our changes have already been pushed. We didn't make any changes to the local development server. We just cleared the cache and restarted everything. So we should be able to come back to Vercel here and deploy it again. The last commit was 12 minutes ago. Let's see. We have 2 minutes ago, so that's right. So now it's doing the deployment. Now, one thing I want to point out is that you've noticed that even though I have VS Code open here, I haven't really used it much except to navigate and to inspect files from time to time. All right, it says it's done. Looks like it's good. Continue to dashboard. Let's go ahead and open it up. Here's the test app running now on Vercel. I'm gonna go to the to-do page. Here's the to-do app. If I hit show completed, it should show me the tests that we had before. So you can see here I have the app running on Vercel, and then I have the app running on localhost here. So this is the one running on my computer. They're showing the same tasks here, even though they're running in a different place because they're accessing the same data here. So we can test three, add task. Looks like it's working. Go back to ActiveTat. Looks like it's working. Go back to show. There's test 3. Now, if you're interested in vibe coding, make sure to jump into the Vibe Encoders community. It's an engaged group. Inside the classroom, I'm developing a SaaS framework that allows you to deploy these types of apps super fast with all of this already built out. We've got support calls every week, but most importantly, we've got a great group of people here all building out their own SaaS and helping each other out and building their next business. I'd love to see you inside the community. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one.